Hey everyone, welcome to our expert series. We always start off the week big on Monday with Greg Dickerson. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. Michael, how about you?
I'm doing great. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is I have actually changed my opinion on something, and I want to run it by someone I know, trust, and respect because I expect you to tell me if I'm wrong. So let me kind of paint you a picture and let me know what you think. There are holes, I'm wrong, what you see in this. You cool with that?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do it.
So I had the opinion that multifamily in Fresno, it's my market, it was expensive last year and sold some units, sold some apartments. Then we have this health crisis, this pandemic. And now what I could not have seen coming is I believe the rush out of the Silicon Valley and the rush out of New York is bigger than I could have imagined, happened faster than I could imagine. And I'm already seeing single family housing in Fresno be impacted by this, meaning renters from San Francisco becoming owners in Fresno. But now what I'm starting to think about is, you know what? There's not enough multifamily in Fresno. There hasn't been a big apartment building built there in a decade. And I'm starting to say, you know what? If Fresno becomes the work from home area that it can for the Valley, because again, you can live there on 60 grand a year and get to the Bay Area if you had to in a couple of hours. I'm starting to think multifamily in suburbs around the country might be great investments because rents are going to go up while rents go down in San Francisco and New York. So I'm just starting to bat this around. It is a drastic change from a month ago. So I wanted to see what you thought.
So, when you talk about multifamily and your opinion of it, your units were a little smaller, right? Like 20 units and less?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So this idea and thesis is going to be different based on the size of the asset in the areas that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the construction cycles in Fresno look like, or whether there's been large multifamily properties built or small ones. But we do know people are moving from the city in a way that it's noticeable but not meanful to the markets around because they're moving in different areas. So
yeah.
The question is, where are they moving to? So it's not like they're all leaving, San Francisco and going in an immediate direct vicinity. They're going all over the country.
Sure.
So the question is, where are they going and what does it look like in those areas? So to your answer, yes, it's going to bring more people into the rental market. What we're really low on right now nationwide is rental single family homes for rent. So that's the biggest demand right now that people are looking for, because a lot of people want houses. They don't want the apartments.
Yes.
And especially the ones that are leaving the city, they're generally leaving for housing. They're not all buyers,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
there's a lot of areas that, there's a lot of single family rental properties that people are going to. Now, the other aspect is the multifamily. Generally in the smaller properties, you're going to be able to be more competitive because you're going to have less vacancy. The larger properties always carry a 5 to 10% vacancy, like 250, 400 unit properties. Those are going to carry more units available on a regular basis because they're always turning over, people coming and going. So it could, get those properties up and potentially get a waiting list kind of situation going that could potentially create competition. But in the bigger markets where most people are going, there's tons of new construction in the pipeline, and inventory is not a problem.
Okay.
So it's really going to depend on the market. It's going to depend on what the inventory looks like in those markets. But yes, it can definitely drive up demand and competition. Here's the big question.
Okay.
How long is this cycle going to last?
Yeah.
And that's the big debate right now, because there might be a lot of people leaving some of the city areas right now, but that's not going to be a continuing trend. Young people love the 24/7 aspects, nightlife of cities. There's a lot of young people still coming up. I've got one of my clients that I'm working with and coaching that is a broker in Manhattan, and he handles condos and apartments and houses. He said he's got plenty of buyers.
Really?
There's still plenty of people, especially now because there's more inventory.
Yeah.
So, he said that there is no shortage of buyers that want to buy in the city, and there's no shortage of people, looking to rent, but there are people moving out, and there's a little bit of transition right now. So it might look like there's an inventory gap, but as you know, supply and demand. So as soon as that supply opens up, prices come down, bam, people are going to, run in and take advantage of it, which is what he's seeing. So the real question is, what does that real attrition look like? Are we actually going to have a void in the cities?
Yeah.
We know prices are coming down in some areas.
No question.
San Francisco, not so much, right?
Actually, it just started. So again, data is really new, right? So for July, San Francisco, the MSA, I don't actually Metro, I don't know whatever MSA stands for, the city of San Francisco saw a price drop of 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it hasn't fell in San Francisco since like 2008. Right.
Yeah, and
So,
if you're
so
talking
it's
1%
meaningful.
of $1 million or $2 million,
Yeah.
that's a little chunk of change.
Yeah, and also it's anytime you see that inflection, right, it rolls over. At least my experience with housing, it's never a 1 month thing, right?
Yeah.
The trend exacerbates.
So my thoughts on all this is the virus scenario in the cities is temporary. Once we're through that, vaccine treatments and death is off the table, people are going to go back to the cities. The big differentiator is cities like Portland and Seattle, and where they're seeing the unrest, the civil unrest that could potentially change some attitudes of people not wanting to be in the city.
Yeah.
But the cities that have that under control, like New York, Los Angeles, places like that, where, the riots and the protests and the civil unrest is not a big safety factor for most people. That's not going to fundamentally change those cities. I mean, these are huge, huge cities we're talking about that have weathered all kinds of economic environments, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's just that, that up and down. Now, here's the other interesting debate. We know that about 70% of the country owns, 30% rents, roughly,
Mm-hmm.
plus or minus.
Yep.
We know that we've had more of a move towards rentals versus owning. And there's all kinds of debates about, what makes more financial sense, and home ownership doesn't make financial sense from a retail standpoint. When you talk about just the general retail buyer that goes in and buys at the top of the market,
Mm-hmm.
interest rates are low, you put a down payment, taxes, insurance, maintenance, ongoing, and the potential of, appreciation, if there is even any, and the potential of a pullback versus what you could do with that money otherwise in rent.
Mm-hmm.
The investment doesn't make sense of home ownership long-term at the retail level right now. Now, if you buy way under market value and all that, forced appreciation, obviously that can make a lot of sense. It just depends on what you're doing. But the question is, are we really becoming a renter nation? Is there more of a push towards renting versus home ownership? And we've seen it change a little bit, but it still hasn't crossed that 50% threshold. And the question is, will that ever occur?
Yeah. I mean, again, my crystal ball doesn't look very far into the future, but what I'm seeing again in my couple of markets that I'm in is we're actually seeing home ownership up. What we're seeing very different 2020 versus 2006 is my competition is all owner occupants today. Everything. I mean, I've never seen it like this. And I've had two brokers on this channel the last week, and they're like, we have 1 month of inventory for housing. So back to your point about housing being the shortage, no question. Pricing, at least for single family homes for the rest of the year, I can confidently say are going to go up. And they'll probably go up double digits because every deal is being bid. Every deal has 6, 7 offers. Every deal has now escalation clauses, which I haven't seen in housing in forever.
Yeah.
This is a supply problem. So you're dead on there. I do see home ownership ticking up. I think, the other good thing I see about today in home ownership is the lending is so much different, right? You and I were around the last time, and there was a 18-month period where most of the loans were just stupid, just dumb, right? Financial suicide, right? ARMs, 2 and 28s, all of that nonsense, liar loans, ninja loans.
Oh yeah.
Very little of that is happening today.
Yeah, and it's getting more difficult, and that's kind of up and down. But it's they're reining in, and the reports I've been reading is that the deeper we get into an economic situation, depending on how deep this goes and whether or not we pull out of it, and when, the banks are getting more and more selective in who they're lending to and what those requirements are. So that's going to change things. But, it's interesting. Grant Cardone and I had that, discussion about housing, and he asked me what I thought about it, because his mindset is more people are going to be renting. And I'm like, there's always going to be buyers. There's always people that don't want to face, the potential to have to move. They want to control their housing situation.
Yeah. They want their pets. They want their paint colors. I mean, there's lots of, I actually think homeownership is great for most people. And that's more because I've seen the financial benefits of a forced savings and inflation and all of that. Because it's the only reason I'm still in California is the couple of times that we had economic shocks, meaning my parents were laid off. They were able to tap into the equity to survive for 3 to 6 months. So
Yeah, like you said, forced savings. Yeah, it is a good thing. It makes a lot of sense. And especially in years past, the question is going forward,
Sure.
it's still forced savings because you're paying the equity down, just like commercial. So
Yeah.
like I tell a lot of people right now, the asset values, the prices of these multifamily assets are crazy right now because the interest rates are so low.
Yeah.
It's kind of negligible. I said, so right now it's a forced savings. It's a principal reduction, cash flow play now. So if you can make a little cash flow, reduce principal from the income, the property's paying for itself. That's kind of what that multifamily play is right now, because you're not going to see the returns that we've seen over the last 5 years in that market.
No, there's no question. Yeah, there's no question. And again, I really starting to love the idea of this whole K-shaped recovery across the board. And what I mean by a K-shaped is there's winners and losers. There's winners and losers in pretty much everything. I think what this virus, this health event, this pandemic is forced everywhere is acceleration of change, acceleration of good change, acceleration of bad change. So if you're New York and San Francisco, it hurts. You've been unaffordable. It's the quality of life hasn't been great. You've been paying $3,000 for a shoebox. And you know what? Now you have a kid on the way or a second kid and you're like, screw it. I'm going to move from being a renter to an owner somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. And New York now, Governor Cuomo is begging billionaires to come back because they're taking their kids out and they're going to go get residency somewhere else. Right. And New York's tax problem is just going to mushroom, and AOC taxing the billionaires. They're just not going to come back. AOC, you can't tax a billionaire 10% if he's not there. It's not how the tax system works. So they're creating some big pain in California and New York. And actually, it's funny, we tie this to the stimulus discussions. That seems to be the one red line that's caused the big thing to blow up is, the Democrats want $1 trillion to bail out states who had problems going in. And the Republicans are like, no, we're not paying for the sins of the past. We're going to cover, right? We're going to cover the health event stuff, but we're not going to cover, I'll just say what it is, New York and California's bad fiscal policy. So it's so interesting to watch all of this happen. And again, I live in California, which is going to suffer for the next decade. It's bad choices. So I don't know where you want to go with that.
Yeah. So, it's all interesting, but I'll tell you what's really interesting is how well the economy did with a 30% contraction. We kept ticking along. A lot of people, like you said, there's good and bad with all of this. I think a lot of us have realized how much we really don't need, and how much we can really do without, and that we don't really miss it that much. I was going to the movies every weekend. That's just what we did. You'd go out to eat 4 or 5 nights a week. Those things have changed, and it's like, I don't really miss it. I'm fine not going to the movies every weekend, not going out to eat. I can deal without it, and stuff like that. And, so it's really interesting to see the economy continue to work in a lot of areas with other areas just completely non-existent, and what the real impacts of that are. And, the big thing that we have to do is we got to get people back to work. We've got to get through this virus situation, get people back to work, get the economy fully open, fully recovered again. And it's going to be really interesting to see what are the permanent fundamental changes in the retail and food service landscape, moving forward, and who, what types of companies and products are going to survive and continue to move forward. And now with this whole TikTok thing, that world of the internet and e-commerce is really interesting in terms of where you're doing business and who is doing business where. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch as that plays out, and what is China going to do and these other governments going to do, to shut down technology and e-commerce in their countries coming out of the United States. So very interesting times.
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to go back to that you just brought up there, right? You brought up personal change, movies, eating out, all of that. What I'm looking for in this is there structural change in consumer behavior? That's a big thing I'm watching, right? And you're right, people are doing with less. And one of the things I saw just last week is the high-end brands, right? The Gucci's, the Hermes, all that nonsense. They're expecting at least a 40% drop in revenue, top line.
Yeah.
And the other thing we've seen is savings is up for the first time. And also credit cards are down, right? Debt on credit cards is down. So it does appear that consumers on the surface are changing. You think any of that sticks long term?
It depends. If we get through this and get the vaccine and all that stuff, no. I think it's temporary. People realize this is a unique situation,
Mm-hmm.
but people have short memories, right? And this hasn't been a long enough, deep enough thing. It's only been 5 months. A
Yeah,
lot has happened in a major way in 5 months, but
sure.
it's only been 5 months. If this was several years, that changes behavior permanently.
Okay.
I don't think on a mass scale behaviors are going to be permanently changed, because we will get through this and everything will be like nothing ever happened again at some
Mm.
point. Once you get to the other side of it. So a lot of it depends on, can we get through this, and do we get,
Right.
assuming we can, that's kind of how, that's going to work. Because, again, it's even like the financial crisis. Behaviors were fundamentally changed from that for a lot of us, but now we're kind of right back to it again, right? And if the same loans were available that were
Yeah.
available back then, we'd all be using them. You know what I mean? So, you
Probably.
know,
Yeah.
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 So do you really ever, learn anything? The big one was the Depression. That was so long and
Yeah.
so difficult for so many people. That changed culture. It changed behavior. It changed, things on a large scale. This is so short term right now that once we get through and once we're done with it, I don't think it's going to be a permanent thing for most people.
So I just want to kind of summarize what I think I heard you say. So let's just call it started early 2020. So if we're
Mm-hmm.
still limping, call it by early 2022, then we're talking potentially structural change in consumers. So 24 months.
Yeah, yeah. If we don't get any significant changes and things continue to deteriorate like they are now
Yeah.
economically into
Yeah.
next year, yeah, I think then you're going to see some patterns change.
Okay.
What you're seeing now, people are putting money away for the holidays. Christmas
Yeah.
is right around the corner.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. So that whole savings, that it's a lot of things hitting people right now. They're like, wait a minute, if this doesn't change, I better have some reserves. We've got Christmas coming. We got to get to the other side. You got taxes coming again.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's driving people's spending habits, which is going to affect a lot of things.
Yeah.
What we saw was we had the shutdown. They opened back up. People went out and had the cabin fever spending,
Yeah.
getting out to restaurants. Now that's kind of tapered back again.
For sure.
And if, like I talk to a lot of friends that own restaurants and retail and stuff like that. So you can kind of see that behavior happening in the way that's changing. But as we get closer to the holidays, people are going to be reining that in more and more and more. And they're going to be, preparing for Christmas and then once you get through Christmas, they'll be preparing for tax season and,
Yeah.
so it'll be interesting to see how that really affects retail spending this year going into the holidays.
Yeah. Christmas could fundamentally be different as well, right? Can you imagine Zoom Christmases? Oh my God. Oh, it's so funny. How does Santa get through the chimneys? Anyways, I don't know. Did you see the 4 executive orders signed yesterday? I don't want to assume you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So any thoughts on the 4? We can take them individually if you want. Anything jump out at you as good or bad or anything?
Well, they're all pretty much irrelevant. There's nothing that's actually going to happen today, this month, potentially this year due to the orders. So, for people listening, it's going to be challenged. They're not sure that they can actually even act on any of it.
Yeah.
And even if they could, it's going to take a while for these things to trickle out, like the $400. If assuming that gets put through and they can actually do that, when will somebody actually be able to receive that money?
Yeah.
And the little fine print, the states are the ones that have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they got to pay for up to 25%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just a big political negotiation move. To be honest, I think it's just negotiating. I think they're just like, we're going to do this. We're going to get the people behind us. Now everybody's going to be, everybody's going to, be on the Democrats about it, and they'll get something done ultimately that they can actually do. But I don't think they can act on it.
Yeah. So let's just tick through them as I see them. Right. I think a couple of them were easy layups. One was the student loans, right? Federally backed student loans, extend the date. Total makes sense. You would expect that. Frankly, schools aren't even open yet, so that made sense. The eviction moratorium, again, on federally backed loans. It's not all loans, people. It's federally backed loans. It made total sense. Then you get to the payroll tax one. I've never got that. I understand the math. I understand what it is, but I never really got that. I don't know why specifically Larry Kudlow has been pushing that for so long. that doesn't make sense to me, right? First off, it's money that's typically put away for the Medicare and Social Security, as I understand it. It is a delay, which means you owe it back in 4 or 5 months when the year is up. I don't really get that one. The only thing I could look at is when you look at everybody being helped, it allows you to check the box of if you're employed, you can get some help. That's the only thing I could see. And again, it's a political thing. So if that's true, genius, right? If you want to say, hey, I help the unemployed, I help the employed, I help students, I help homeowners. I mean, I get the political play, but I don't like that one. That one feels misplaced to me. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah. So number one, it's immediate. So it boosts your paycheck a little bit by the
7.6%. Yep.
Right. Just that little bit of withholding that gets taken out of your check. And, then of course the employer's matching contribution, I don't know if that gets suspended or not.
No,
I think it's
just the employee.
Okay. So, that's immediate. So that puts money in your pocket and it incentivizes people to stay working and continue to work because, like you said, but it's not a long-term solution. And if it's just a deferment, then it really doesn't solve anything. Nobody's going to go for it because it's Medicare, Social Security. I mean, you can't mess with that. Yeah. You can't stop that because that system's already in a hole anyways. Yeah. They've been borrowing from that for years. So that's not a super meaningful thing, but that is immediate and it does incentivize people to keep working versus the unemployment that largely disincentivized a lot of people, to not go to work because they made more with the unemployment than they would work in. So they need to come up with a fair system there, which doesn't seem to me like it'd be that hard, if you have a job that you can go to, if you don't go, you don't get the unemployment,
Yeah.
If you have the choice and you're just making a choice or, there's ways to know how that works, whether or not you can actually keep your job and you're choosing not to go because you're making more money.
Yeah. Then the other one, of course, is the unemployment, the $400, 300 from the Fed, 100 from the state. Can the states do it? All of that nonsense. The one thing
in this day and age, we should be able to, what should be done is if you are legitimately out of work and you lost your job due to this, your income gets replaced. Shouldn't be more. It shouldn't be less. You should get, dollar for dollar, you should be made whole. Seems like we could come up with that. We have payroll taxes withheld every single, week. When I was, when I owned restaurants, man, I made deposits every week, So that system can be tracked to replace somebody's income. That's what they should be talking about. How do you make people whole? And see, that's why we're not going to have inflation because people aren't being made whole. They're not being made whole for what they lost. And then, the average individuals, you and me and everybody else that aren't, in that position, we're not getting extra money put in our pockets to go use.
No.
So, we can't really have inflation at the consumer level because of those reasons. You've got it obviously at the, the asset and the investment level, but that's what really needs to happen. People need to be made whole. If anybody in Washington is listening, and if not, we should send them this episode, just replace their lost income. That's all you got to do. It doesn't have to be more, doesn't have to be less. Replace it dollar for dollar. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as this is an national emergency or whatever kind of classification you have. Yeah. That would be, I would feel good about that for sure.
That ain't that hard.
Yeah, you would think, right? Yeah, but the other thing that I think is really happening about the way the unemployment's going to be spent or filled or whatever today is it's not going to be as easy as maybe the headlines make it sound. So my hope is the politicians in DC get together and sign something this week. Otherwise, people who only read the headlines are going to be looking for that $400 to show up and be very disappointed. Because I've read reports that the way they're doing this kind of through FEMA might be months before people see it. And
even the last time, there's still people now probably that never even made it through the system. We saw months after it was instituted that people couldn't even get through to file.
Florida specifically, I remember their system is so outdated. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of states. So it's very tough times, very difficult times. People need help. They need it now. The ones that legitimately need it, that their job is gone. The government put you out of business, made you stay home. That should be made up dollar for dollar, and it should be retroactive, Yeah,
I agree. Retroactive. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm just curious, what is on the agenda for Greg this week? Going out, looking at deals, going around. What's a busy guy like you do in a week like this?
Yeah, yeah. I'm always looking at deals. I've got stuff coming to me all over the place. I had a multi-property portfolio come across my desk the other day, 240 units. With a bunch of
Wow.
different properties, and I went and looked at a mountain property to flip. It's funny you mentioned escalation clause. There's people putting in offers with escalation clauses on that. Gorgeous
Wow.
property that's a bank foreclosure that somebody started renovating, and
Stopped.
I think you talked about it, stopped. Yeah, so it's wide open, literally to the elements.
Oh my God.
Gorgeous. Yeah, gorgeous property, so yeah, so I'm out, looking at properties, doing stuff, not
Nice.
many face-to-face meetings anymore. That's kind of stopped,
Sure.
you know. But yeah, every day I'm looking at deals, I'm looking at companies, opportunities, and
Nice.
yeah, it's there's a lot going on out there. I mean, there's still a lot of activity.
I guess I'll ask this last question before we wrap up this episode. Do you think you'll be busier in the next 18 to 24 months than you were in the last 18 to 24 months? Busier meaning deals.
And I don't think so, because
Oh, okay.
I'm not seeing value. I'm not seeing value.
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of deals, but I'm opportunistic.
I like
And
that.
I like a lot of margin. So I'm not doing skinny deals. I like to have margin. I like to have,
No
plenty of
skinny
room.
deals.
And
Yes.
yeah, so I see a lot of deals, but not a lot of opportunities, not a lot of, value. So,
Sorry, do you
uh,
think you'll evaluate more deals in the next 18 to 24 months, meaning more stuff will come across your plate, or is the deal flow always the same?
yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a significant decrease in deal flow. I mean, I
Okay.
get stuff, all the time because I'm looking at different things, but I think it depends on the market. So the market's hot right now. There's a lot of buyers, and people know what kind of buyer I am. So a lot of deals just don't even get sent to me. You,
We're
you
not going
know,
to Greg. Greg's too cheap.
yeah, exactly. They know, I'm looking for opportunities, and whether it's a company or whether it's a piece of real estate or a development deal or whatever. There are a few projects that I've been looking at, working on for a lot of years. I've got a couple of large pieces of oceanfront property that I've been working on for 20 years that,
Oh, wow.
I want to develop. And, eventually, it's one of those owners that's been holding on to it forever, thinks it's worth, whatever. And
Yeah.
eventually he's going to die and it'll go up for
Somewhere
auction.
else.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, thank you very much for doing this with us Monday. I always love starting off strong. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. It was good to see you.